Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Public Safety, Transportation, and Environment Subcommittee. Today we have the Maryland Department of Transportation Port Administration. We also have the Transportation Authority, and then we have the Maryland Thoroughbred Racetrack Operating Authority. That's the order we'll proceed in. Mr. Stephen McCullough will lead us off for the Port Administration.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Steve McCullough from the Department of Legislative Services, here to present the Maryland Port Administration budget for fiscal 2026. Starting on page 1, you'll see the graph there shows that the Port Administration's operating budget increases by $5.8 million, or nearly 11%. On page 2 shows the capital program summary. We'll have a further discussion later in the document for that. The managing for results discussion begins on page 5, and really the first 3 performing graphs, which all deal with the kind of cargo and volume and market share at the port, show the same story, and that is in 2024 things declined from the previous year, and that's the obvious reason for that is the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge and the temporary closure of the port caused by that collapse. The one managing for results that we've included that shows improvement between 23 and 24 is on truck turn times at Seagirt Marine Terminal. Turn time is a important metric. The faster that trucks can turn around, the more throughput there is, for any, so it increases the capacity. And that chart is shown on page 9. There was in fiscal 2024 a closeout error where nearly $4 million in general funds that were appropriated for the Howard Street Tunnel were reverted in error. These funds are being brought back in as a deficiency into 2025 in the current budget. You may recall that there were 2 kind of legislative initiatives adds last year to the budget, just one for the port, and that was $1 million was added for drone-based security. Now, back in August of 2024, the Board of Public Works reduced that $1 million by $250 under their authority to make reductions of up to 25%. And a fiscal 2025 deficiency in the budget is introduced, withdraws the rest of that $750,000 because the port is not currently using that type of technology for its security services. Looking at page 10, Exhibit 6 shows the agency spending kind of summary, and you can see from that pie chart that personnel plus security expenses account for nearly 69%, almost 70% of MPA spending. Exhibit 7 shows the budget change, and as I mentioned at the beginning, the 26 budget increases by $5.8 million. Of that, personnel expenses account for about $1.9 million, and under Port Oversight Management heading on page 11, you can see the top 2 items are explain most of the rest of it. There's a $2.1 million increase in security services, and also there's $1 million initiative to meet the Climate Solutions Now Act requirements. Looking at Exhibit 8 on page 12, this is an annual exhibit that we show. The port, as you know, raises its own revenues, and so we show what the net operating revenue picture looks like. In the current 3-year period from 24 actual to the 26 allowance, the operating revenues of the port don't quite meet and cover the operating budget. I will point out that none of the funds from the revenues go directly to pay for their expenses anyway. It all gets into the trust fund, so mingled, and then it comes back out. But this is just an example of showing how much it would cover if it went directly. And then, of course, if it doesn't cover the operating, then none of the capital. I would note that this is different in some years in the past. Their operating budget has been covered by their revenues, and it's really the, again, downturn caused by the partial port closure that's contributed to this picture this year. On the top of page 13 is the personnel section. There are two new positions, one in the operating budget, one in the capital, in the allowance. The one in the operating budget is a recommended reduction that we'll talk about in a few moments. The PAYGO program discussion begins on the bottom of page 13, and Exhibit 9 on page 14 shows the discretionary grants that the administration has received under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. There are 8 grants that they've received totaling just under $200 million. Those are listed on page 14. The 2025 to 2030 6-year program for the port totals $1.8 billion. The graph on page 10 breaks that out by major category. And you can see that system preservation accounts for 57% of capital spending over the 6 years, with expansion and efficiency of projects accounting for a further 26%. The capital allowance for 2026 is shown in Exhibit 11 on pages 16 and 17, and the 26 capital program totals $428 million for MPA. That includes other funds that do not flow through the state budget. The cash flow analysis for the capital program is shown in Exhibit 12 on page 18. And this is, you'll see kind of the normal ebbs and flows as capital spending either accelerates or slows down because projects are either held up for a bit or really going well. And so you can see that between 25 is introduced and 26, the capital program increased by $32.7 million. Those changes are shown by project in Exhibit 13 on page 19. And then between the 25 working and the 26 allowance, there was a decrease of $17.3 million. Those changes by project are shown on Exhibit 14 on pages 20 and 21. Turning to the bottom of page 21 and then on the exhibit on page 22 is the first year construction funding. So back in 2022, legislation required that beginning in the January 2023 CTP, that projects receiving first year funding for design or construction must be listed in a table in the CTP. You can see by Exhibit 15 on page 22 that for fiscal 2026, $44 million of the MPA's capital program is first year funding, with the other 90% for $385 million being ongoing. Those projects for both 2025 and 2026 are shown on Exhibit 16 on page 23. On page 24 is the one issue, and I alluded to it in the MFR discussion, and that's the fact that the impact that the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge has had and the partial closure of the port has had on the port's metrics, managing for results, the cargo tonnage has moved through, the number of cruise passengers, et cetera. And we've asked the administration to comment on improving these metrics, especially some of the metrics are shown as returning to the 2023 levels, but there are others that continue to be forecast at lower levels than 2023, and we've asked if they have any expectation for when those might exceed the 2023 level. Page 25 is the recommended actions. The one recommended action is for the operating position. This is a cybersecurity position. The recommendation is to delete the funding and deny the PIN, not because the PIN is not needed in the position, but rather that given the fiscal situation of the state, the department and the administration should reclassify a vacant position instead of seeking a new position. The second recommendation is for annual quarterly reporting on Howard Street Tunnel, the same language that was in for the current year and they are currently doing. I will note, speaking of Howard Street Tunnel, the next page 26 has the update of the Howard Street Tunnel project, and one of the good news in this latest update is that CSX was able to start double stacking from the port by going through an alternate route that's longer, but it has allowed the CSX to close down Howard Street Tunnel 24 hours a day for construction, thereby advancing the completion date of that to hopefully early calendar 2026. That concludes my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions for our analysts? Steve, before you, you said they took a longer route. They were able to double stack. Was there a fiscal impact by doing that?
Well, so this is a CSX project, and what happened is they cleared the clearances for Pennsylvania and Delaware are complete, and so that allowed them to do the rerouting through that section. So it's a benefit to the port because they can get now more capacity. But when the Howard Street Tunnel opens, it's going to be a shorter route to the Midwest, so that'll be an even better solution.
All right, thank you. Secretary. Mr. Executive Director, come on up. Great to see you all. Proceed when you're ready. Good to see you.
Good afternoon, Chair Jackson and members of the committee. For the record, Paul Wiedefeld, Secretary of Transportation.
Right.
Good to go, sorry. They always say don't touch, so I don't touch. Again, Paul Wiedefeld, Secretary of Transportation. With me is Jonathan Daniels, Executive Director of the Maryland Port Administration. Thank you, Stephen, again, for the extensive and excellent review that you've done. Despite the challenges, challenging year, obviously, with the tragic loss of the Francis Scott Key Bridge and their 6 individuals, the board had some very significant achievements. In March of 2024, the MPA released new economic impact numbers showing over 270,000 jobs in Maryland are linked to the Port of Baltimore. The Howard Street Tunnel project continues to move, as Stephen just talked about, with the anticipated completion date in 2026. It will increase the port's business by approximately 160,000 containers annually and generate nearly 14,000 jobs. And finally, for the 16th consecutive year, the MPA's terminals received a top rating excellent on a security assessment from the U.S. Coast Guard. Again, further proof that the Port of Baltimore is not only one of the most productive ports in the U.S., but also among the most secure. I'll now turn it over to the Executive Director to give some brief overview of the port and then also answer the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Wiedefeld. Good afternoon, Chair Jackson, members of the committee. It's a pleasure for me to be here today. For the record, Jonathan Daniels, Executive Director of the Maryland Port Administration. I'd like to start out as well and thank Stephen for the great work, the overview that was done, this detailed and reasonable assessment of our program allowed us the opportunity again to continue to learn about what we do and how we can continue to improve financially. I'm pleased to be here to present the state of the port as we continue to sustain and create new jobs, build resilient and sustainable infrastructure, all while ensuring the port remains a steadfast steward of the environment and a leader in innovative green initiatives. In fiscal year 2024, the Maryland Port Administration handled 9.1 million tons of general cargo at its state-owned marine terminals. While the port's overall volumes would have been higher if not for the elision and, of course, the Key Bridge collapse, we continue to make progress in our rebound and recovery. And a few figures of note. At Seagull Marine Terminal, the port's dedicated container terminal that is operated by our partners at Ports America Chesapeake, we surpassed a record for gate transactions on January 2nd of 4,026. Early trends are pointing to record gate transactions throughout 2025. On January 21st, we handled 6,956 container moves and 11,065 20-foot containers from the vessel YM Trust. Both of these numbers besting previous records. Again, this is testament to Ports America Chesapeake and our great International Longshoremen's Association labor force. We are also continuing to add container business from some of the world's largest ocean carriers and container shipping companies, and we have increased our weekly services from 12 to 16. On the cruise side, our ships, Carnival Pride and Royal Caribbean's Vision of the Seas, they were able to restart operations and once again sail to the exciting locales like the Bahamas, Bermuda, the Caribbean, New England, and Canada. The Port of Baltimore has become a very popular cruise port, not only for Marylanders, but people from as far away as North Carolina, as far north as New York, and as far west as Michigan. Our strong drive-in market means cruise passengers are staying in our hotels, eating in our restaurants, and generating over $1 million in economic impact for every ship call. We're also excited about our in-transit port calls, which bring different brands to the Port of Baltimore. Last year, we welcomed Azamara Cruise Line, and in 2026, we will welcome AIDA Cruises from Germany, as well as Crystal Cruises. We also celebrated recently 20 years with Carnival Cruise Line serving our port and announced a new 5-year contract with a 5-year renewal option with Carnival to continue offering year-round cruises through the Port of Baltimore. Carnival is one of the world's largest cruise lines, and we are delighted that they continue to make the commitment and stay right here at the port and within the state of Maryland. MPA continues to work hard to closely align the statutory mission to increase waterborne commerce through our terminals in Maryland with stewardship of Maryland's natural resources and the health and well-being of the environment and our neighboring communities. MPA's strategic approach to environmental restoration using dredged material is a foundation for our newest ecosystem restoration initiative, the Mid-Chesapeake Bay Island Project, which comprises James and Barren Islands. Once Poplar Island reaches capacity in 2030, Mid-Bay must be ready to accommodate nearly 2 to 3 million cubic yards of sediment dredged annually from the Maryland Chesapeake Bay approach channels, while also restoring 2,144 acres of remote island habitat. Barren Island is anticipated to begin acceptance of Honga River dredged material in late 2025 or early 2026, with James Island accepting dredged material around 2030. Just authorized for construction by Congress last month, the Seagirt Loop Channel Deepening Project is currently in the pre-construction, engineering, and design phase. In partnership with the Army Corps, the project will increase container capacity and improve supply chain efficiency for shippers. In November, the MPA was awarded a $147 million grant from the Environmental Protection Agency. The project will expedite decarbonization efforts and the electrification of the Port of Baltimore by providing the imperative electrical infrastructure needed to increase power capacity. This is in collaboration with 6 major maritime industry partners that will benefit from the procurement of 213 pieces of new zero-emission vehicles and equipment and associated charging infrastructure. The project elements are expected to significantly decrease greenhouse gas emissions with an estimated 35% reduction in air emissions compared with 2020 levels. MPA is also committed to investing in workforce development and apprenticeship opportunities. Our vacancy rate currently at the port is 6.51%. This is down from 17.6% in 2023. This reduction is the result of the hard work of MPA's reimagined Human Resource Office. MPA plays a key role in supporting the Baltimore Port Alliance and Career Expos, which bring together local job seekers and employers from regional maritime transportation and logistics companies to facilitate the growth of a healthy maritime workforce. Since 2019, BPA has hosted 6 hiring and career expos, with the most recent bringing together over 300 job seekers with 34 individual employers. We're also expanding opportunities for apprenticeships for skilled trade workers, including an auto diesel apprenticeship program designed in conjunction with Community College of Baltimore County and a non-registered electrical apprenticeship program in conjunction with the Associated Builders and Contractors of Greater Baltimore. We're connecting with local high schools and historically black colleges and universities as well. Together with our partners, MPA hosted a comprehensive Masonville Cove summer internship program, enabling 4 interns from local HBCUs to explore conservation careers and gain practical experience and leadership opportunities. In closing, the state of your port is strong and resilient, and we look forward to continuing to grow as one of Maryland's leading economic engines. We have provided additional budget information to the committee for your reference, as well as written response to the DLS analysis. I'd like to focus very briefly on our response to that analysis. One is MPA should brief the committee on efforts to improve performance when performance measures in areas of lagging 2023 levels are expected to meet or exceed those 2023 levels. For a level of context, understanding that in 2023, that was a record year for the port. At that time, we moved 52.3 million tons of cargo across all docks throughout the Port of Baltimore. And while we fell short of that this past year due to the elision and the collapse, this is our 2nd highest tonnage year on record, even with the closure during that period of time. In overall cargo tonnage volume to MPA public marine terminals would have been higher if not for the elision and the key bridge collapse. While the full extent of the loss resulting from the elision and bridge collapse is still being determined, But for that bridge collapse and the resulting vessel closure at the port could have possibly surpassed the all-time record of 52.3 million tons set in 2023. MPA continues to make good progress in its recovery and rebound. In partnership with Ports America Chesapeake, MPA will have 5 new container services this year from the largest container shipping companies in the world. These services will open up opportunities to work with new shipping alliances from Asia and Northern Europe. MPA recently signed a 5-year contract with Carnival Cruise Line. Carnival is the largest cruise operator in the world and has been serving the Port of Baltimore for 20 years. Year 1 of the new contract will show a 27% increase based on minimum annual guarantees and revenues from previous Carnival agreements with the MPA as a result of Carnival increasing passenger usage charges and modified daily parking rates. Regarding operating recommended actions, number 1, delete funding for new cybersecurity position. The agency should reclassify an existing vacant position instead. The department respectfully does not concur with DLS recommendations. Security of the nation's critical transportation infrastructure requires focus both on physical security as well as, and maybe even more so, cybersecurity of the state's transportation assets. As we do go through our reorganization, we're looking at utilizing available PINs that we currently have for vacant positions to be able to fill a variety of positions as we go through a reorganization. There will be a focus on continued business development activities, as well as grant management and other areas where we need to be able to keep those PINs as close as is available. We utilize a holistic approach where it doesn't matter the department within MPA. Those PINs are available to the entire organization. Currently, there are 15 PINs available, and as I had mentioned, we're down about 6.1% on our vacancy rate, but 10 of those are currently in the pipeline, and some type of action will allow us the opportunity to hire those positions in the not-too-distant future. Number 2 is to adopt a narrative on quarterly progress reporting for the Howard Street Tunnel project. As Steve had mentioned, there's been a significant amount of work that has been done, which is going to allow for the opportunity to shrink that construction timeframe, as was a recommendation last year. We do provide quarterly reports on the updates for the Howard Street Tunnel, and we'll continue to do so going forward.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you both gentlemen for your presentations and your responses. A couple quick questions before I go to others. I appreciate your updating us on where you were with the 15 vacancies or so, and 10 are in the pipeline. Speak to us about the cybersecurity position. Is it a cost matter or a salary matter? What's the?
I mean, for us, we'd like to be able to keep that position as the changing cybersecurity landscape.
And I guess my question is it not? It's not filled. So what's the? Speak to us to that. We have the university system that's available to you, and obviously any delay in that regard is something that we need to be aware of.
Sure.
We understand.
It just has not been filled as of yet. There is a need for that has been set forth, but we have not filled that position as of yet.
Is there
They won't have the PIN until fiscal 2026, so we cannot fill that.
Got you. Till 2026. All right, thank you. Thanks for the clarification. Secondly, and keep us abreast, please.
Yes, sir.
Secondly, the analyst spoke of the security services that are without your drone security. Can you speak to that?
Yes, on the drone itself, or just you're seeing an increase in need for security on site, which has been reflected by the increase in the overall costs associated with that. That's the Department of Homeland Security requirement that we do have a certain level of security within our port, within the border of the port. At this time, there's just not the need or to have that drone alignment. With what we can do with what's available on the ground and such, and with the coverage that is necessary at that level, we just don't have the need to be able to utilize that drone system.
So you're comfortable with the contractual services you have without the drone?
As of this time, yes, sir.
As of this time. All right. Okay.
It could change, but as of right now, we're very the partnership that we have with with the Transportation Authority, with the law enforcement, and then with the private contractors that we have for both access control and law enforcement. There's a good program that is in place, and that's legislated as well by the Facility Security Plan that is a requirement of the U.S. Coast Guard and Department of Homeland Security.
Lastly, I'll say this, after, since you clarified the cybersecurity position, I commend you all on your relationship with the university system, with the community college system, your high schools, and your HBCUs. I think, we're very fortunate with the higher ed that we have in this state. So we will certainly be watching closely. I think you'll probably get an AI question or two, or something more coming from a member on the panel. But, we're your partners, and all the universities are, ramping up their ability to enhance their cybersecurity. Bowie State has the Cyber Warrior, which is coupled with HBCU. I was very fortunate to be a part of that development of that over the years. So we have a lot of folks that are available who could be helping you out even before this pen comes into place.
Thank you.
But just a little tidbit for you regarding that matter, to where you could have someone in maybe on an internship basis or something to kind of get you going. So I'm going to begin with Senator Solly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Following that, I know one of our biggest problems in our nation is national security. That's one thing that's been stressed since 9/11. And I know how important that is for the ports in our country, let alone our port. And we've seen that from the bridge going down to now clearing that out to see where we are now, but even more so having the better opportunity to reroute the double stacking, which I know is a plus.
Yes.
It's a perk. So in time, it will be a benefit to us, and we'll see that when the time is, that when we'll get the Howard Tunnel. Yes. So I want to just thank you for the information. It's very important, and I think we'll see in time how important it is when we get the new employees that are going to be filling in when we get the Howard Tunnel, and when we see other things that are happening there. And positions are really important. And covering those positions as well through security or other positions, knowing the port that I know it as well, and you know that, I'm going to thank you. If there's other ways or means by training, for instance, and I know the training that you do then are in detail, and you do great training down there, because I've been trained down there myself, as you know. But knowing the positions, if there's more that we can do, going through our colleges, as the chairman said, and working with them, if there's more we can do, let us know. I'll stress it as well. We're here for you, as you know. And we want to do all that we can to make sure. It's a stress not having position filled. It's a stress not getting those places where you need, and you're double stacking, in a sense, people to fill those. So we want to make sure that we're going to let you know we are an avenue for you. And if there's more we can do, I know there's, by the way, we talked before a little bit about the construction of some of the things that are going on right now, especially with some of the peers. Can you, but the way you explained it to me, and I appreciate it, can you talk about that a little bit? Thank you.
Sure. There has been a request. We currently, within our North Locust Point area, we do have a peer structure that, based on a 2020 evaluation and investigation, was indicated that we had about 5 more years left of usable life on that before we would no longer have access to it for maritime activity. A group that we have that utilizes it right now uses that primarily for bringing in road salt for state contracts. The contract that we have and the agreement that we have with Canton Stevedoring allows for them to utilize that terminal, the marine side of it, through the end of 2025, at which time we're going to pull that out of service. And then there was an extension of 1 year, allowing them the opportunity to be able to remove the salt and the other material that they have on site. So their agreement allows them the opportunity to be there through 2026, at which point their agreement terminates. There has been an expression and desire for Canton Stevedoring to be able to continue beyond that point. What we don't know right now, because we were working off of 2020 data and that engineering investigation, as to how much usable life remains in that pier structure, what type of additional degradation has occurred, and ultimately what the costs are. The cost, as stipulated in 2020, was about $15 million. And in order for us to make a decision as to whether we're going to prioritize that, put that into the CTP or put that into some type of priority funding program, we need to know what the data is. We need to know, is it $15 million? Is it $20 million? Is it 25, based on the condition of the dock itself? We are investing $400,000 in that investigation. And a little bit later this year, we'll have the findings of that, and that will allow us the opportunity to internally make some decisions as to whether we're able to continue utilizing that pier. Is it a rehabilitation? Is it a complete replacement, based on that new knowledge that we gain from that study?
Thank you, Mr. Director. And if I could, Mr. Chairman, it's important that I think we realize at the Port of Baltimore, the limited space that they do have and the work areas that they have and how important they are to the Port of Baltimore. They have been limited for a long period of time in the city of Baltimore of the areas that they can do and move in the salt at this time of year, or other spices that come in, or other metals and things and copper.
Yes.
And so they're limited there. It's a good thing that they have a good neighbor in Trade Point Atlantic and been partnered with them for a period of time for Ro-Ro. But I think that's something that we could maybe still have conversations, Mr. Chairman, about, you know, those areas are really important to the Port of Baltimore. And we got to find ways we can continue to have those cargo ships that are coming in, and they can continue to have placements in areas where they can import. And I know how important that is to us. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So,
Hi there.
Senator Elizabeth.
A couple things. One is, you get federal money for what exactly?
Primarily for grants, the competitive grants that we apply for.
Gotcha. So what is the status of the grants that you have? I got two questions. One is the ones you have, given all the, you know, frou-frou in Washington. But specifically, I mean, who's told you what about the grants that you have? That's question number one. And question number two, related to the bigger fish stuff like the Howard Street Tunnel and other stuff, and everything else kind of related to the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. What do you know? What do you speculate on all the federal stuff, short run and medium run?
Do you want?
Don't speak at once.
I can certainly, you know, one of the ones, and we've received a significant amount of questions about, is the Clean Ports, $147 million from EPA. We are very happy to report that that's actually broken up. There's two separate grants. One is for emissions monitoring and outreach, and the other is for the actual equipment, the electrification. Both of those grants have been signed off and have been, we have a contract in place with the federal government and with EPA for that to continue to move forward. So our staff is working hand in hand with the 6 other partners that we have on the development of the subrecipient agreements to make sure that we can move those projects and continue to move those projects forward.
So you get the money directly from EPA?
The money is actually in an account right now that would be accessed by
It's a
the state.
reimbursable
It's a
account.
reimbursable program.
It's a reimbursable.
So you send in bills to EPA?
Yes.
And have you gotten communication from EPA in the last 3 weeks as to whether you can keep going or not keep going?
Yeah.
If I could, so a lot of this obviously still, you know, very open. We are under ordinary course of business, then yes, we have these funds in effect locked up. But as we've seen, there's been some movement to try to undo what's been approved and whether or not that there's other things that will be looked at when that's done. So I think we just have to be cautious, you know, in assuming that that is there. We're going to continue to work as if it is. But we, you know, we're all watching to see how some of this plays out at the federal level.
Okay, but in other hearings with other agencies, some have heard from their federal agencies and some haven't. And
Sure.
EPA and specifically, I think the 3 agencies we had the other day said there was like no communication from EPA. Have you had direct communication with EPA?
I don't, do you have any
We have,
specific on this
yes,
one?
we have had direct communication. We also work closely with our Maritime Association, the American Association of Port Authorities.
Yeah.
To work together to make sure that we're getting, and that they're getting information on what the status of the program is. There has been a little bit of difficulty, those that have been trying to go into their accounts the last few days.
That's what I'm asking you.
But, so we're trying to get additional information coming back on that from AAPA, and it's active. I just read an email probably about an hour or so ago specifically regarding that. We have the information to access that and are going to continue to work with them, continue to communicate them to make sure that there's the actual release of the money.
Have you been able to get anything released since January 20th?
We have not as of yet.
When would you next be looking to get money released?
We actually have, it's going to be very quick, it's going to be very soon because we have reimbursements that are already ready to be engaged.
So like next week?
Could be next, yes, within the next few weeks, yes.
Next
Sir.
few, okay. Would you get back to us and let us know?
Absolutely.
When you submit this, do you get it or you don't get it?
We certainly will.
Give us access, okay. Now,
If
what
I
about?
could, Senator, I think, well, we'll do that department-wide, because you can imagine we're dealing with the Federal Transit Administration.
No, I'm happy, do it
Highway.
department-wide.
So as we come in with these budget hearings, we'll give you an update on where we are with this.
Yeah, but even after the budget hearings,
I understand.
if you can update us, I mean, in this, this is why this is a good discussion. In this specific example, you expect to have to try to get some in the next few weeks. Either you get it or you don't get it, and we need to know whether you get it or you don't get it. So that's EPA. What about other federal grants, if any?
Again, we were not as far along with the agreements in place, the infra dollars that we got, $31 million from the Department of Transportation. There's still environmental work that needs to be done and completed before we would be able to get that released. But our staff is working with federal staffs as is available to make sure that there is ongoing communication and ongoing progress that is being made.
So we haven't needed to get the money yet because we've got work to do before we get the money.
That's
what you're
correct.
saying? Okay, I understand. So again, what does the Department of Transport, and that's, the money comes directly from the Department of Transport, U.S. Department of Transportation. Is that correct?
In the second.
Yes, in the second one, yes.
The second one, yeah, that's what I'm
Yes, sir.
asking. So in that case, have you gotten any communication from the U.S. Department of Transportation relative to that grant since January 20th?
Yes, ma'am.
No, I mean, we are.
Great,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep, working on that, yes.
We haven't signed an agreement yet.
Yes, there is no signed agreement on that, though.
So we don't have a signed agreement with them
No.
for that?
Still because of the work that needs to be done. in order for us to-
I understand. But has, whatever the part of Department of Transportation that deals with this, has there been any communication from them since January 20th relevant to the executive order that was issued and then withdrawn, or other limits on the possibility of us getting the money?
Proceeding as.
Sorry?
Communication has occurred and we're proceeding as if there is available funding.
And so they've told you to proceed?
Yes.
Okay, that's really helpful.
Yes.
Any other federal funds?
There's a combination of some smaller grants for work that we're doing for security provisions and such. As you saw within the document, there's about 8 different grants that we have going on right now.
I'm sorry, which
from staff-
agency is that?
So one is FEMA.
FEMA?
Port Security Grant, Building Resiliency Infrastructure.
Yes.
Grant, those are both with FEMA.
And all grants are proceeding as indicated.
Again, I'm coming back to the communication. So FEMA has or has not coordinated with you, communicated with you?
Yeah, we have.
You don't know?
Could you
Yeah,
let
let's
us
get
know?
back to you on that.
Yeah, that's fine, that's
we'll
fine,
get back to
that's
you
fine.
on
I'm not trying to torture you, I'm just trying to understand what's going on. They're trying to torture you, I'm not trying to torture you. Exactly. This is our ace in the hole over here. So, okay, thank you on the federal money issue. On the employees issue, you summarized a variety of things you've been doing. Could you get us something on paper about that gives more detail
Yes,
related to all the stuff related to the workforce?
absolutely. Yes, sir.
That would be great. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, AI. Are you going to ask AI or?
No, you can do that, but I want to, before you move off of this, so you have an infra grant here for $30.9 million.
Yes.
So that's infrastructure for rebuilding America. Is there any conversation about that? Again, you stated you're proceeding as normal.
Communication,
But we're just
yes.
trying to find out about communication.
Yes, communications have been proceeding as if that project continues to
That's
progress.
the Transportation Department one?
That is,
Yes, sir.
yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
AI.
You're on.
We're asking everybody about this. What are you doing, thinking about doing, considering doing, looking into to make AI improve our efficiency in your agency?
AI becomes a predictability factor when developing additional facilities. It can take, it takes into consideration congestion mitigation, everything that's ultimately necessary for us to be able to predict future involvement. So we will be integrating that into the work that we're doing on our operations, as well as associated within the engineering activities as well. So that is something that we will continue to be able to push. We don't have right now a full integration of how that's going to impact our operations. Still a little bit new associated with that, but that is something that will be involved, and actually will be a part of our 20-year master vision plan that we're going to kick off with procurement this year, and allowing us the opportunity to take a look at operations, take a look at our facilities, take a look at commercial opportunities that are out there, and then back that up with infrastructure development that's going to be necessary. And that's where AI begins to play a role.
Sure.
In that predictability factor, taking a look not only what's going on now, but 5, 10 years, 15, 20 years down the line.
And Senator, as we're preparing a report for you, you asked for a report department-wide.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but I wanted to,
Yep,
I'm
that's
trying to get a feel for what goes on in the individual agencies. No, I appreciate you working on that. Let me ask you a question, again, on AI, though. I hadn't really focused on cybersecurity. It would seem like AI would be very helpful in terms of cybersecurity, because, I mean, basically, the way I think of cybersecurity, and those who know me, correct me if I'm wrong, it's lock picking and lock fixing. And lock picking AI should be really helpful, and maybe even in lock fixing. Is that an area you guys have thought about?
We haven't integrated that as of yet, but certainly is something that we will take into consideration.
Okay.
It's a whole new generation that I think everybody's trying to get their hands around as to what it means, both as again, as you said, the picking and the setting of the lock as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely. Use those young, bright minds we have in our state.
Absolutely.
At your behest. So thank you, gentlemen, very much.
All right.
And we have one witness, and that witness is Mr. Tim Castle. Castle. All right. Come on up. Canton Doring. State your name for the record and proceed. You have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, Director, Secretary. My name's Tim Castle, and I'm the Executive Vice President of Canton Port Services and Project Stevedoring. We operate the North Locust Point Marine Terminal as a bulk port distribution facility. Primary commodity we handle is de-icing road salt. Just last month, we delivered 300,000 tons of road salt to area municipalities. I'm here to testify today that our operation, as Director Daniels pointed out, will close at the end of this year without infrastructure investment in that facility. And, pending the results of that inspection, our operation cannot move to another facility. As Senator Sailing pointed out, there's limited space on the river. We are the only bulk terminal south of the bridges and tunnels in the Port of Baltimore. We are the deepest port terminal closest to Washington, D.C. I'm here today just to point out that I had prepared remarks, and then I heard something yesterday that the governor said that bears repeating. He said you can't have economic mobility without physical mobility. And our entire transportation department and the winter budgets of every town, county in the state of Maryland and surrounding states is dependent on the physical commodity of road salt from January to March to keep the transportation system open. That commodity moves through the Port of Baltimore. It moves only through a limited amount of facilities. If one closes, that will hamper and cripple the distribution of that commodity during the winter months. Thank you for your time today.
And we appreciate it. We do have in your packet, gentlemen, you have his written report. Any questions? Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I want to thank you for coming down. I was somewhat briefed about that. We talked about it. and I know it's a priority. And when that final outcome that comes with the inspection, you know, we would like to get that information. And that's a priority to us. Why? Because it's an asset. And I think we all understand that in this room. More importantly, I think you do than anybody else. And we want to make sure that availability is there to make sure we can transport everything from the Port of Baltimore necessary. It's very, very vital. That salt is important to the state of Maryland. And getting it to the right place at the right time with the process that we've done is very important. So communication, we'll have that communication. We're going to make sure of that.
Okay.
And whatever it takes, we're still going to get the salt. It's going to come in one way or another, whether it comes from there or someone else. But I would like for it to continue to be there if it's available. I think it's a priority. They have funds on the side, which already has been stated. They have funds right now to do the inspection. They have the funds that are available to do some repairs. But if it's in need of dire straight different repairs, it might take a lot longer if it's possibility. And I would like to see that because you said it and I said it. We need every part of that port to do exactly what we need to do for every move. It's vital to the East Coast. So I want to make sure that we have your information, and if we do, we can continue, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay.
Yeah,
to communicate with you.
information is in the packet
Yes.
along with contact information.
Yep. Thank you.
Your
That's
report.
fine.
So quick question for you. So the sunset is obviously a date that we all look at regardless of what we're doing. Conversations, what type of conversations have you had regarding, you know, the sunset itself? I mean, it's the end of this year. It means a lot. And I'll throw a little side note here. You know, just, I'm not sure if there's a mixture of what the salt is. I know that there were some jurisdictions, one of my 3 jurisdictions had an issue with the salt that came in. But we certainly need good products here in the state to make sure that we can continue to move. But, you know, there's a date, once sunset is set, that's a date that we all know is a date certain. And the negotiations or conversations leading up to that. So we're hearing from you now. This is February of 2025, and it sunsets at the end of this year. So what type of ongoing conversations have you had?
Sure, thank you, and that's an excellent question. We've been working since 2019 with the Port Administration on renewing a lease there. We've gone through 5 port directors since that time. We've had a global pandemic and a maritime catastrophe that nobody could have imagined. And our item kept getting pushed back. And here we are now in the winter of 2025. And we're bringing this up now. And I know it's rare to come testify at a budget committee, but this is why time is of the essence at this point. And we needed to make sure that our voice was heard about this issue.
Thank you. Appreciate it. There's no further questions. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you very much for your time today.
Absolutely. All right. Next up, the Maryland Transportation Authority. Mr. Quist, our analyst will get us started.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Samuel Quist from DLS. Oh, sure. Yeah.
I was waiting for you folks to come in the other door. All right.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Starting on page 1 of the DLS analysis, the operating budget for the Maryland Transportation Authority is $595 million, or an increase of approximately $16.5 million from fiscal 2025. As a reminder, MDTA is a non-budgeted state agency, and its revenues are held separately from the Transportation Trust Fund, sourced primarily from the toll revenues collected at its facilities. The summary of MDTA's capital budget is shown on page 2. As you can see, there's a pretty significant increase in capital expenditures. The allowance in fiscal 26 totals $1.06 billion, an increase of about $293 million from fiscal 2025. This reflects increased capital expenditures related to the Key Bridge rebuild and other capital projects. Turning ahead in the analysis to page 6, Exhibit 2 shows the proposed operating budget changes. The largest change under personnel expenses, these grow by about $7.5 million. MDTA has independent authority over its personnel. However, these increases largely mirror statewide salary actions seen in other agency budgets. The operating expenses for MDTA increased by about $9 million. The largest change being an increase of about $3.5 million related to new and replacement motor vehicle purchases. And then there's several other changes to contractual services, fixed charges, and other supply and equipment purchases for agency operations. Exhibit number 3 on page number 8 shows the sources of funding in the fiscal 2026 budget. The primary ongoing source of MDTA revenues are toll revenues. In fiscal 26, these are estimated to be about $757.5 million. Bond proceeds in the fiscal 2026 budget total about $570.9 million based on projected debt issuances. There's also $41.6 million in intergovernmental revenues included in the allowance. These include reimbursements for MDTA police services at the Port of Baltimore, BWI Marshall Airport, as well as other loan and interest repayments from MDOT. On page 9, exhibit number 4 is a illustration of the uses of funding in fiscal 2026. You can see here, due to increased capital expenditures, the capital program is about 64% of total spending in fiscal 26. The operating budget totals about $450.5 million, and MDTA debt service totals about $144.5 million. Exhibit 5 on page 10 is showing the actual and projected toll revenue numbers for fiscal 2020 through 2026. In fiscal 2024, actual toll revenues totaled about $848.5 million, which was the third year in a row that revenues exceeded over $800 million following revenue declines caused by the pandemic. Revenues have remained fairly high the last 3 years. However, in its financial forecast, MDTA anticipates that there will be a decrease in toll revenues of about $100 million in fiscal 2025 due to the closure of the Francis Scott Key Bridge and other revenue projected declines. On page number 11, Exhibit 6, this is showing the breakdown of the sources of the toll revenues in fiscal 2024. You can see here that half of all toll revenues came from 2 facilities, the Fort McHenry Tunnel and the I-95 facility. Toll revenues from the Francis Scott Key Bridge in fiscal 24 totaled $44.8 million, or about 5% of overall revenues. For context, in fiscal 22 and 2023, which were the last full fiscal years that the Key Bridge was operational, they accounted for about over $50 million annually. On page number 12 begins the discussion of MDTA revenue and debt. Exhibit 7 is showing, the columns in this chart are showing the debt bond sales, and the line is showing the total debt outstanding. MDTA has authority to issue its own debt, which are backed by toll revenues. These are separate from other state debt, and MDTA has its own affordability measures governing its debt. There was a change to the total cap on debt outstanding last session. Chapter 2 of 2024, which was enacted following the Key Bridge collapse, among other provisions, raised MDTA's total debt limit from $3 billion to $4 billion. You can see on Exhibit 7 that the total debt outstanding declined slightly in fiscal 2025 due to there not being any debt issuances in fiscal 24 and projected in 2025. However, due to projected debt issuances in fiscal 26 through 2030, you can see that the line on this chart increases. Total debt outstanding in fiscal 2026 is projected to increase to about $2.6 billion and is projected to peak at about $3.8 billion in fiscal 2029 and 2030, which would be just slightly below the new statutory cap. On the top of page 13, the analysis briefly discusses that MDTA also issues debt on behalf of other state agencies, which is referred to as non-recourse debt. For reference, in the back of the analysis in the appendices, there's a summary of non-recourse debt as well for your reference. On page 13, there is a summary of MDTA's personnel. There is no change to the total number of positions authorized in fiscal 2026. As of January 1st, MDTA's vacancy rate was about 10.9%, which was a decrease from the 13.6% vacancy rate estimated in January of 2024, 1 year ago. The discussion of MDTA's capital program begins on page 14 of the analysis. The total 6-year program capital expenditures are approximately $5.1 billion, as shown in Exhibit 8. And you can see the increase from fiscal 2025 through fiscal 2027, largely due to the programmed funding for the Key Bridge reconstruction. Exhibit 9 on the next page, page 15, shows that the programmed capital funding for fiscal 2026, just under half of that funding is related to the Francis Scott Key Bridge rebuild and other projects at that facility. Outside of the Key Bridge, the other two large projects in the capital budget are the I-95 Express Toll Lanes Extension Project, as well as bridge deck rehabilitation on the Francis Scott, or the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. For your reference, the entire list of capital projects are shown on pages 16 through page 18 of the analysis. And then on page 19 is a summary of the major changes in the 2025 CTP compared to last year's capital program. The issues section of the analysis begins on page 20 with further discussion of MDTA's financial outlook. Exhibit 12 on page 20 is showing the 4 main MDTA financial standards: the rate covenant, the debt service coverage ratio, the unencumbered cash policy limit, and the debt outstanding limit. And on page 13 is a summary of MDTA's financial forecast, which shows these financial standards. Due to the increased capital expenditures and the projected declines in toll revenues, these financial standards are projected to decrease or worsen over the forecast period. For example, the unencumbered cash policy declines to the $400 million threshold in fiscal 2026. The debt service coverage ratio drops below the 2.0 threshold in fiscal 2028, which for context is 1 year earlier than was shown in last year's MDTA financial forecast. In its submission of the 2025 financial forecast to the General Assembly, MDTA notes that it projects the need for a system-wide toll increase during the 6-year forecast period in order for MDTA to continue to meet its financial standards. On the bottom of page 2 of the analysis, the bold language asks MDTA to comment on this projected need for a toll increase, as well as more specifics on the timing of that. Then the next The next section of the analysis goes into more discussion of the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse and the Key Bridge rebuild. Beginning with the first portion discusses impacts on revenues. MDTA engages with an outside consultant to prepare annual 10-year traffic and revenue estimates. Exhibit 14 on page 24 is showing one of these traffic and revenue estimates for the estimated total impacts of the Key Bridge collapse compared to a scenario where the bridge collapse did not occur. Exhibit 14 is showing that the total net revenue loss estimate is $131.8 million over the period fiscal 2024 through 2030. The total amount of revenues that the Key Bridge would have collected during that period totals $265.8 million. However, this estimate is accounting for revenue increases from the Harbor Tunnel and the Fort McHenry Tunnel that would offset some of that. Then, as I mentioned earlier, the financial forecast programs increased expenditures for the Key Bridge rebuild. There's $204.5 million programmed in fiscal 25 and $376.8 million in fiscal 2026 as the rebuild begins and is ongoing. The next item that the analysis asks MDTA to comment on page 25 is if it has additional details about the federal fund reimbursement and the logistics behind how the state would be reimbursed for that. As you all know, the federal budget continuing resolution that was passed last December authorized 100% federal reimbursement through the Federal Highway Administration. The analysis goes on to mention the other component in this funding piece, the ongoing litigation against the ship owner and operator. That's an ongoing process. To the extent that that litigation results in additional damages being awarded to the state, that would be another factor that plays into the federal fund piece. Lastly, page 26 just kind of summarizes where the Key Bridge reconstruction process is to date. And I'll let the agency talk more to that. On page 27 are the DLS recommended actions. As MDTA is a non-budgeted agency, DLS is not making any operating or capital budget recommendations. And then the final portion of the analysis on page 28 and 29, for your reference, there's an update on the status of the Chesapeake Bay Crossing Study Tier 2 NEPA and where that is at, as well as the I-95 Express Toll Lane Extension project. I'll conclude the DLS presentation there, and I can take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for our analysts? Seeing none, Mr. Secretary, come on up, as well as Mr. Executive Director, come on up. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, Paul Wiedefeld, Secretary of Transportation for the record, and with me is Bruce Gardner, the Executive Director of the Maryland Transportation Authority. I'll keep my comments very brief, but I did want to just highlight some of the activities as we very aggressively going after the replacement of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. So a progressive design build contract was awarded just 5 months after the collapse. The general engineering consultant contract was awarded last month, and the construction management inspection services contract will be awarded later this month, moving very, very quickly through the process. Last month, we started pre-construction activities, which included underwater surveys and soil samplings, for example. And demolition and construction are set to begin later this year. And obviously, the most significant milestone was reached 2 days ago with the Key Bridge rebuild was unveiled in terms of its preliminary design. And I hope that you will agree that while the bridge is being built in the same footprint as the old bridge, it will be a gateway to connecting communities and workers for generations to come. So with that, I'll turn it over to Bruce to do a quick review of MDTA and respond to the analysts. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Again, Bruce Gardner, Executive Director of the Maryland Transportation Authority. So I'll pick up where the Secretary left off. We are very glad to have shared that design earlier this week. A lot of hard work went into that. That said, much harder work lies ahead with the rebuild. We work to continue to finalize the design, refine construction costs and plans, negotiate price packages later this summer before significant rebuild activities get underway near the end of the year. Over the next several months, we're committed to continuing our outreach and engagement efforts with both the surrounding communities and local transportation industry. On February 3rd, we held an event with Kiewit and the Legislative Black Caucus to meet with subcontractors and suppliers to update them on the recent and future Key Bridge opportunities. It was really an excellent opportunity. I was able to stay for the first part of it, and we got some good comments after the session, because this really is a unique approach to the bridge build with the progressive design build. So we're still doing a lot of education for the contractors in the community to understand how things will roll out, how Kiewit will engage with subcontractors to do work that really hasn't been designed yet, right? We're only at those initial stages of design. We're also working with our consultants in the Maryland Higher Education Commission to bring on board interns to work on the Key Bridge project, as well as supporting Kiewit in their efforts to establish local hiring and apprenticeship programs, because we really do want to make sure that this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity allows us to build the transportation workforce of tomorrow. The Key Bridge Rebuild website and Facebook pages are been vital resource sharing opportunities. So we hope that you're able, if you have questions from constituents, direct them to those online resources that we have, and we will continue to do those outreach events in the coming months. So we do have, as Sam referenced, and I do thank Sam for the really good summary of our budget and our issues, but we do have a couple other big projects that have been completed in stages and are ongoing. The I-95 Express Tolling projects, we're able to open up that first section of roadway that extends the northbound direction that goes from White Marsh to Mountain Road in Hartford County. Also on the Bay Bridge, that eastbound redecking project is over 50% complete in this current phase, and we'll be finishing that in this first half of 2025. So it's been a very complicated project to actually lift the decks up and replace them overnight, and we had a slow start in the winds of March last year, but the crews did make up some good time over the summer and in the fall. The Chesapeake Bay Crossing study and being able to get to the point of public workshops this past December, where we actually showed different alignments and our recommended alternative for two bridges to replace the existing bridges on that corridor went very well in December, and our next steps are to think about some of the alternatives that still are included in those two bridge options, such as the number of lanes and transit and bike ped options that could be in place on any future structure that we were to build there. Considering that this is a budget hearing, I just wanted to talk a bit about our engagement with the credit rating agencies. Fitch did confirm our AA rating and offered a stable outlook. Moody's, on the other hand, affirmed the rating but placed the MDT on a negative outlook, citing the uncertainties associated with the Key Bridge replacement project and our declining debt service coverage. So we continue to meet with those agencies to reassure them. We just set up meetings for the near future with them to update on this progress. We had a number of risks areas as we started this process, and we continue to eliminate some of those risks as we go through the rebuild process. Finally, I'd like to say that the MDTA is highly focused on improving our overall collections. Our efforts includes expansion of the Easy Pass and our interoperability with other agencies through a central hub, implementing reciprocity agreements with states nearby and that have large volumes of uncollected debt, and other customer service focused enhancements, such as adding improvements to our notices so that people will get them, will pay attention to them, and then improving our customer service so that they're able to make those payments more easily. So I said finally before, I guess I should really say finally on the issue of challenges, the traffic volumes in that Baltimore area that particularly your constituents are facing is ever present in our minds, and trying to make sure we work as quickly and safely as possible and do things to help alleviate traffic when we can. With that, I'd like to go on to the analyst recommendations and remarks and respond to those. As far as our financial outlook, on page 20 of the analysis, the question to comment on the timing of the potential toll increases and how they would be implemented. As Sam said, the approved financial forecast shows the need to rate tolls in FY28, a year earlier than we were showing last year at this time. The forecast is largely due to the Key Bridge, as you saw in those charts on the analysis. At this time, MDTA anticipates beginning a toll setting process in early calendar year 2027. When increasing toll rates, the MDTA will do so in compliance with the process established in state statute, that's Transportation Article 4-312. That public process begins with a toll proposal for the MDTA Board's consideration, followed by 2 public comment periods and public hearings at each toll facility impacted. Afterwards, the board takes final action to approve the final toll recommendation, and the entire process takes roughly 10 months to accomplish. Included in our responses, in our written responses, we've provided a flow chart that describes each step in that toll setting process that we hope will be useful to you. It has been to us in the past. Second comment that was made to us that we were asked to respond to was that we discussed the anticipated timing and receipt of funding and federal funding, and if any funds have been received. The anticipated funding sources for the Key Bridge include insurance proceeds, federal emergency relief, quick release funds, federal emergency relief funds, toll revenues, and any recoveries from the Dolly's owners and operators. The MDTA received insurance proceeds totaling $350 million from its property and business interruption insurance carrier on August 5th, 2024. To date, $25 million of those proceeds have been used to cover salvage and debris costs. This week, we expect to receive $10 million of federal emergency relief quick release funds, and shortly the MDTA will receive the balance of the initial $60 million federal emergency relief quick release funds. Afterwards, we will utilize the insurance proceeds as if they were federal funds in compliance with all the federal rules until they are exhausted. Once exhausted, we'll seek reimbursement for the balance of those rebuild from the federal funding, the relief funds. And when preparing the financial forecast, these funds were assumed to be received 1 year from the date of the request. So we do have that period while we wait for those reimbursements, and that current assumption is 12 months. Again, it's a current assumption. So with all that said, the MV Dolly's owners and operators are the sole parties responsible for the destruction of the Key Bridge and the resulting damages and costs. And I really do appreciate the Attorney General's laser focus and his team's efforts on that. It's been a daunting task for both them and for our staff to go through that process, but we do intend to prosecute the claims against the owners and operators. So with that, I will conclude my remarks and be available for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for those remarks. Quick question, what funds are not reimbursable? So
From the federal government?
From the federal government.
If we were to do any kind of enhancements to the bridge, probably certain ones aesthetically are allowed federal funds. There might be others that are not. But right at this point, we haven't identified any that are not reimbursable. Is that? If we were to deviate from, so yeah, since we are staying in the current alignment, then those are reimbursable. But if we were to expand the number of lanes to do other things that weren't there before that are not in compliance with existing safety standards, so we were able to put wider shoulders, 10-foot shoulders. We are able to do stronger barriers because of their current standards. We are able to be higher off of the water for the shipping channel because that has been a process with the Coast Guard. We're able to do the anti-climb fencing on the bridge because that's considered a current standard in those bridges. So those are some of the examples of the differences that are reimbursable. And we haven't come across those ones that we would have in our current preliminary design that would not be yet.
And thank you for that. And I do appreciate you mentioning about the anti-climb fencing around the bridges. You know, the Secretary and you all, we've had these conversations. One of the bridges in my district, as well as other places, you know, the Thomas Johnson Bridge, we have those issues. So I'm glad to see that, you know, you guys are focused on that matter as we continue to move forward and look at some of the existing infrastructure that we have going forward. But great progress on the Francis Scott Key Bridge thus far. I have one question for you. As we go forward, so yesterday there was a piece of legislation that we I don't know if you had anyone in the room that talked about. We have a new procurement subcommittee, and there is a departmental bill where we're trying to redefine the procurement process in the state. I take my hat off to what you all did up in Dundalk, I guess, earlier this week.
Oh, with our session on Monday?
Yes, yes. That's a pretty good effort to make sure folks are enlightened of the processes as we go forward to try to become a part of that. So I do. We look forward to, as we work this piece of legislation, to ensure that we talk to, you're one of our largest partners about these procurement processes. I don't know if you have anyone monitoring those.
We do.
You do? Okay, that's great. So if there's any concerns, let us know. We certainly want to walk through it with you. And lastly, the Easy Pass, I love the expansion process you have for those of us who are customers who travel up and down the East Coast. It is, even Florida is accepting more of that, and that's huge for those who participate in your program. You need to make sure you have all the revenue you need because you have a lot of challenges before you. And again, the trust fund, you took a big hit, $448 million per year that you're losing. I think that's what the chart showed.
Over 11
years,
I think.
11 years.
Oh,
over 11 years.
yeah. Sorry, that
you go back to
specific
the
number,
chart.
it could have been the forecast for, because of the Key Bridge and other factors.
Yes, because of the
sorry,
forecast. Yes, and
Yeah.
and where you're talking about where the loss comes
Yeah.
from. So as you want to increase the tolls, and Mr. Chris, what page am I on? I think we're 44.8 million from the total revenues for by facility fiscal 2024. Exhibit 6, page 11. And so your plan for, talk a little more about the plan for the toll increase.
So the toll increase is something that, because just like with the trust fund, because our revenue sources are not inflation sensitive, the last time the toll rates were adjusted, as you recall, is they were adjusted downward in 2015. They were increased in 2013. So in 2028, we kind of have to make up for that inflation gap over those past 9-10 years, and we would go out for public hearings in that. Now, the other issue that's out there that we want to make sure we're addressing is the uncollected tolls and improving our process for when we are setting those tolls through and trying to collect through a video collection process as opposed to the Easy Pass, that we need to continue to improve our efforts on that. And I believe the analyst referenced a report that we submitted to you in December with an outline of several different initiatives that we're undertaking to do that. One is continuing to do things like we did with Florida. It would be to expand and have interoperability with Texas, Oklahoma, and Colorado in the West, because a lot of commercial vehicles that are registered there. So rather than having to do video tolling with them, their transponders would be basically compatible with our system. So, and then entering into those reciprocity agreements with a state like Pennsylvania, which is probably the first one we would go to. So those are just two different types of efforts, one in 2028 with adjusting our tolls upward, and the other is collecting improving our collection rate on our existing tolls.
Okay, thank you very much. I think Senator Salling had to leave, so I have a question for you. Could we get we are on page 22. He's asking for a copy of the plan for the committee. In January 2025, financial forecast reflects additional fiscal stress. Down the bottom, due to the forecast change, projects projects the need for a system-wide toll increase. Can you give us a copy of the plan? I saw the flow chart you had. Right. Could you share?
Yeah, I mean, our financial plan is repeated in the back of Sam's analysis, but we can provide our version of it as well.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Senator Rosebeth?
Thank you. Well, let's start with the Key Bridge. So the question I've asked everybody about, how real is the money given what's going on? So what exactly is our relationship with the money at this point?
So it is an authorization to receive once we expend money and submit for reimbursement. So it will require future appropriations from Congress to have that money come to us.
So there's no appropriation for it at this point?
They do their appropriations on basically that annual basis. We have $300 million in the insurance in this current year that'll cover our costs for the next year, so it would be the next appropriations.
So in real life, assuming the $1 billion round number, the $300 million from the insurance covers the first $300 million. Is that the way to think about it?
Right, yes, yep.
So we're not going to need an appropriation until we've run through the $3 million.
So, right.
300 million.
Right.
So when is that likely to be?
That should last us about a year, I think is what our projection was.
A year
yes.
meaning
year from here.
Meaning calendar 25?
Yeah, the early part of calendar 26 is when we would need start going into the federal money.
Now, we are getting quick release dollars, though, before
Right.
that.
That was for
So
the
if you
for
recall,
salvage.
when the bridge collapsed, you could put in money for immediate work you had to do. So we were given, in effect, $60 million to that.
Right.
So we're submitting that now, and they're paying us that now. And then the larger set of money, you
rebuild.
can't pull that down until you
spend
use
it.
up the insurance.
Okay, but the 60 million, you say we're submitting it and getting it. Have we submitted it?
Yes, we've submitted parts of it, and then we will be submitting more in the
Have
next
we gotten any since January 20th?
when we're expecting to get something within the next couple days, essentially. Yeah.
Again, same thing. Could you let us know if you get it or you don't get it?
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you. What communication has there been on this project with the U.S. Department of Transportation since January 20th?
Since January 20th, we continue to work with Federal Highway, because that's who we're working
Yeah, Federal
this
Highway,
through.
yeah, I'm sorry,
So it's been very good. So they're sort of in lockstep with us in our understanding of how this all plays out until we hear differently. That's how we're
But they've
proceeding.
given you no indication that the money would not be there?
No.
They were actually with us at the event earlier this week.
Well, I'm sure they were there, but that doesn't mean anything.
No, but no.
I'm joking.
It's nice
I'm
that they didn't say no, so that was,
No, I
that was a good
it's nice.
sign.
They're for the photo op. I got that part. No, I understand. I'm a little more worried about the fine print, but no, I understand.
One step at a time, right?
No,
Yeah.
I understand. That's helpful. Okay. One of the things I noticed, which makes sense, is that one of the reasons we can go fast is because it didn't have to go through NEPA, because it got a waiver from NEPA, right?
It still had to go through NEPA, but it went through a certain, categorical exclusion. There was a lot of work and documentation, sir, that went into being able to say that we didn't have any additional impacts, and we did that basically on a very, expedited basis. We still went through NEPA. It's just,
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
But basically, you had to prove why you didn't have to go through the whole NEPA process. You had to-
Staying in the existing footprint.
Yeah, which I
have
actually, no, I know,
additional
I mean, I get
impacts,
the geography. But it raised a question in my mind, just so I understand better. So to what extent is this like a one-off situation, or are there a reasonable number of situations where you're able to waive out of the NEPA process for projects? Maybe this is for the secretary or
Well,
either of you.
there are, again, there are different levels of environmental. So
Right.
you can get categorical exclusions for all types of projects. So that's not out of the ordinary. What was really helpful was that literally from the day of the bridge collapse was the federal government and us working literally around the clock in working through these issues and making sure it didn't sit on a desk for 3 months or something like that.
Yeah,
Just
right.
some of the basic things.
So it was political rather than
Yeah,
technical.
it was everyone engaged, from OMB to the
No, that makes
Secretary of
sense.
US DOT.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, thank you.
Before you move on.
Yeah, please.
So, just to follow up on what the senator just talked about. So earlier, Mr. Director, you spoke about your plans for the Bay Bridge, the two spans. And obviously, I always talk about the Thomas Johnson Bridge, but so for those exceptions with the NEPA exceptions, is there, do you foresee having to ask for an exception or the planning out of the Bay Bridge, or as we're stepping and looking at that project, would you need such an exception?
If I could, just one general comment first. There is not an exception to the NEPA process. You go through the NEPA process. There's different levels within the NEPA
Yeah, I
process. So that's, there are no ways to go around the NEPA
Compress
process.
versus.
Yeah, and it depends on what you're doing and
Gotcha.
the potential
Well, I
impact
guess
that you could have.
that's the question.
Yes,
It's an easy pass through
So
the
if you, yeah,
process.
so if you, so if you're talking about, you know, the Bay Bridge, I mean.
So with the Bay Bridge, we are basically going through that full process, and it does need to be that because we are not exactly sure where those new structures would be located. We don't know how big they are yet, so we're going through that documentation. And what I'd just like to point out one of the benefits, because I had an opportunity for one of the senators on the Eastern Shore to say something and I forgot to, so I will say it today, is like the benefit of that process is that when you get to explain to the public the why you're doing something, and really in those workshops in December, you know, why we're not recommending tunnels because of the environmental impacts of that, and educating the public throughout that process and doing a step-by-step process and circling back to them. There are benefits to it because the less you have challenges, legal challenges afterwards, you know, so that's why the Bay Bridge process is a much longer one, but for such a big significant facility we're talking about expanding, it's beneficial to do that as well.
Yeah, look, I agree with you 100%. And the reason that we ask some of these questions, not just for budget, for the budget perspective, is because when we're in the community, we get these questions. Of course. And so, you know, you can best believe each time a bridge project comes up, I get hit or we get hit. And so our ability to at least, you know, say that we are having the conversation. Again, my hat gets tipped on what you guys did the other day. That didn't go unnoticed. And, you know, for projects such as that and for small businesses and for the state as a whole, you know, everybody's watching those. So, yes. Senator.
Thank you. Just for the record, I asked the NEPA question because I've dealt with not as much as you guys have, but I've dealt with NEPA for all kinds of projects over many years. And I don't think it's all it could be. I mean, I agree with community consultation. I do this for part-time for a living, actually, community consultation. So I'm all for that. But it's the point you made, Mr. Secretary, about stuff sitting on people's desks. Is the NEPA process, in my observation, slows stuff down a lot without commensurate benefits in improving the projects and improving public confidence in the process. So I like the fact that there are opportunities to do it smart but fast. So that's the reason I was asking the question, to try to understand it better. Let me go back to the project itself. So the contractor, the general contractor is Kiewit. Is that how you pronounce it? Mm-hmm. Are they union or non-union?
They have both. They work through both models.
So how is that set up for this project? To what extent is this project going to be union?
I mean, their intended model is to have a union involvement in this project. So they're working through that process right now.
So is that basically because they'll use union contractors where they can't find adequate workers in non-union? Is that the way to think about it?
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure how to frame it.
Yeah.
I'm not
Sorry?
sure if there is a model.
Let me ask a question.
Sure.
On that,
Please.
I think what I'd like to know is, so you're essentially saying that it's up to that general contractor to work that out? Mm-hmm. Is that what you're saying? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's what I thought you were saying. So you don't know. So when are we likely to know the extent of?
It should be very soon because they have to lock those things in.
Lock in their subcontractors?
Yes, yes.
So very soon is next week or next month or next year?
Within the next month.
Okay. Could you get back to us with that?
Right.
Yes.
I'd like to get the details on that.
Okay.
I'm a Joe Biden Democrat. So I'd like to see as much union participation as possible. We talked about the federal money. Okay. AI. Let's, how have you thought about it being relevant in your agency?
So there's several different areas, whether it's engineering. We are working with it is the University of Maryland, Jim? College Park, yep. On predictive cues on the Bay Bridge, so that instead of
Great.
just, that type of thing, so that predictive traffic. Also with our inspection and maintenance programs, kind of that prediction of when things are going to be deteriorating. Easy Pass, on our customer side, making that process better, knowing what, is likely to come up, looking at the trends in there. So that's more of the future. Looking from on the IT perspective, just those service desk, type things that everybody's essentially using AI for, and then doing analysis potentially of our invoicing process. So those are just a few examples that we're considering right now. But as things are developing, as we're getting into this, and for me, I'm also just getting back into this type of thing too, as we've kind of drawn our head out of some of the Key Bridge solely focused things.
I get that.
But those are just a few examples.
Let me ask a question for the Secretary. So in terms of all the different units looking how to use AI, are they kind of on their own, or is there centralized technical assistance from the department?
We have recently done some reorganization where we're pulling a lot of that back into the Secretary's office because there's obviously some economies there.
Yeah.
And then also, where are there things where we can, sort of cross-pollinate? So again, we're sort of at the beginning of this in a lot of ways, but we did that maybe 2 months ago.
Okay, great, thank you. Last question is workforce. I didn't see anything on personnel in the report unless I missed it. Was there something in the report on personnel that I missed?
Just our no change in positions.
But is there anything on how many positions you have?
Yes, 6, yeah.
Where is it? I'm sorry. I missed it somewhere.
And while everybody's looking for that, so with your AI component, so are you looking at so you have University of Maryland engaged with you now, dealing with the Key Bridge and the Bay Bridge?
Bay Bridge, yeah.
Right, Bay Bridge. So do you foresee in the future, and you can talk to us later about this, using our university systems and the expertise that we have in our universities to kind of look at all of your infrastructure and some concepts going forward, so.
Yeah, they're excellent resources in the state, and we continue to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think you're doing more things at the Secretary's
Yeah,
office too.
absolutely. Thanks.
Page 13.
Page 13. Sorry to be thick here. There it is. I just flipped by. There's so much information here. So, what are your pain points in terms of hiring these days?
It has, so we do have a rather large police force within MDTA. So getting the folks interested in that. We do have a new chief in the past year. We have a recruit class graduating that's relatively small. That's next week. But the next recruit class after that, I'm going to knock on wood as I say this, is potentially double the size, if not more, of the current class.
How many police slots do you have approximately?
In terms of the classes, we'd like to be.
No. How many policemen do you need?
Our total complement is in the high 400s, I believe. Is that the right amount for, 600, 500, so yeah, well, sworn.
I know, I understand. I'm just get a ballpark.
Yep.
I know you've been looking in the department at all kinds of apprenticeships. Have you done anything on police apprenticeships?
We have both cadet programs where they're bringing them in early. And the chief just told me what he had some of the cadets involved in recently. So when we identify them, we're trying to bring them into us and working, with them before they go and even are eligible for an academy class. We're also doing, he's done a kind of a community outreach and policing academy just to get people more interested in the agency. So that's pretty much the extent on the police side.
WMATA just stood up a police apprenticeship program. You might want to take a look at it. Obviously not identical, but somewhat similar. And I think police is a fabulous, I defer to the chair, but.
Absolutely. And Chief Dave Mitchell, he's our guru. For decades, and he heads up that movement. So he's always available, and anything we can do to help you.
You could pursue that. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Senator Sullivan.
Thank you. Thank you. I had to do a bill real quick down in finance, but thank you so much. First of all, Secretary, I want to thank you for all the opportunities we work together, and still, as we know, it's going to be ongoing for the Key Bridge. We made front page. That was pretty cool, but anyway. But I want to thank you for that. And one of my concerns is the stress on our constituents in raising rates. As you know, in my area, it affects a lot. If anybody's going south in my area, no matter what, they have to pay a toll. And it stresses out my community, which is low middle class. And it's not good for us to constantly get those rates, those rate hikes or anything else. And I've stressed more than anything else, the best thing you can do is get that Easy Pass and put it in your car. I have one in every one of my cars. And I stress that because how much you save.
Appreciate that.
So I push that, like unbelievably, and how easy it is to get. I really had like a town hall to kind of show this is what you do, and it's so easy, and you can go to the MBA. So I stress that, but I see what we have by where you're talking about the forecast and the physical stress, I believe, but. I just want to know if when you implement this in that time, can we get that plan? Can we see that? So each time when it does go up, maybe, or the plan that you do already have in place, that we can see that possibly.
So we don't have a current plan in place. So during my responses, I think I mentioned that early calendar 27 is when that process is likely to begin.
Right.
And it's a 10-month process, so absolutely. Particularly those of you right around the bridges. And you know better than anyone kind of all the different types of discount plans that we do have. So all those will be considered, and we've talked previously about how, there's opportunities there. I think there are probably more limited opportunities than you'd like to see. But, we do have some work to do to prepare for that.
And I appreciate the conversations and the opportunities we've had. The stress about our truck drivers that we've constantly talked about. And that, I believe that's ongoing. I've talked to the director and you as well, and our secretary. But I just believe I kind of say like we're still not there because it's still troubling that our truck drivers are burdened down in some ways, because I know we've reduced in some areas, but it's still kind of, you have your independent truck drivers and they're constantly paying a toll, not even going over the bridges we've talked. And I just believe if we could kind of assist and help them out in some ways, so it's not that much of a stress, that's all we ask. And I appreciate your time. And if we could talk about it more, I'm more than happy to sit down. I'll get you a cup of coffee and we'll sit down and talk about it.
I mean, I think you've seen, when we're able to in this extraordinary situation, we do have that turnaround, and we have not been collecting tolls on that while the bridge is down, and that was specifically to help with the rest of the system. And we were able to do that working with, getting advice from our bond counsel and everything, that wouldn't be a detriment to anything. So when we can, we're trying to.
And I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate you. Mr. Secretary, we'll see you tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
No public witness. All right, our next, we're going to have Mr. Patrick Frank give us the overview of our next authority, our Maryland Thoroughbred Racetrack Operating Authority. Mr. Frank, proceed.
Yes, on the first page of the Maryland Thoroughbred Racetrack Operating Authority, or MTROA analysis, provides a description and some basic budget data. The purpose of this agency is to essentially to oversee thoroughbred operations and to also rebuild some assets that the state has actually they're MTROA assets now for the racing facilities that they have. As you can see, there's a large $10 million amount in excess of normal spending in fiscal year 2025. That has to do with the one-time pass-through grant, and I'll talk more about it. That was authorized in some legislation last year. I'll talk more about this when I discuss the legislation. On page 70%, a little more than that, is for contracts. These are things like accounting contracts, marketing contracts, pre-construction contracts, and things like that. There is a relatively small amount for other charges that the authority has. Page 3 shows the change from 2025 to 2026. As I mentioned earlier, there's a one-time $10 million grant that's passing through there, and that's why the budget is a lot smaller in 2026. There are some modest changes in other line items in the budget. And On page 20, or excuse me, page 4 is the personnel data. The personnel data shows that there are 6 positions. Of those, 3 are filled right now and 3 will be filled. This agency always was going to ramp up more slowly from our conversations last year, and they will hire positions as they need them. And so they anticipate hiring a few more positions in the near future. The first key observation is on page 5. It has to do with the legislation from last year. First of all, I'll discuss some of the major changes from a financial standpoint, the most largest of which is that the total debt that's available for this, the par value increased from $375 to $400 million. There was also some changes in what it was authorized for. Pimlico gets a larger share of that. Also, there now is a training facility that will be constructed instead of the improvements to Laurel Park. And so there was money, is $110 million of authorization is for that, to purchase some land and to build the training facility. And Laurel Park authorizations were taken out of the bill. Also, there was a cap of $17 million in annual debt service that was removed. And finally, there was the $10 million that was authorized in fiscal year 2025, this current year, for some capital, working capital. This is going to be a grant for the Maryland Jockey Club, and the agency should be prepared to discuss exactly how they're going to use that grant money, that the $10 million that they're giving to the Jockey Club. On page 6, Exhibit 3, it shows what's going to be available in revenues and receipts for the authority, and that includes, obviously, largely is construction of it, but it does include some of these operating costs as well. And as you can see, the estimate right now is about $527 million total. That includes $400 million in par value bonds. Every year since 2022, the $17 million has been appropriated for this. After 5 years, they have $85 million. There's $34.5 million from the racetrack facility renewal account and some interest earnings also in this account. It's generally, funds don't keep their own interest earnings, but in this case, the exception was made and they are given the interest earnings. So that's pretty much what they have to work with through 2026, and that, largely is going to be obviously for construction and renovation. And on page 7, Exhibit 4, it shows really those same numbers, but instead of saying what they have in 2026, it says, well, what is going to be need to be essentially appropriated through 2056 when the bonds are retired. The lines across the top are annual debt service costs. We expect about $23 million to about $27.5 million. The interest rate assumptions are, and this is the same assumptions we're using for other things like Built to Learn, is a range of, say, 4% to 5.5%. So if they're closer to 4%, you're talking in the $23 million range. Up to 5.5%, you're talking about the $27.5 million range. Now, since it's been posted, I talked to the Stadium Authority, and they've also have their estimate right now that they're working with is about $29 million a year. They're using a little bit of a higher interest rate than this estimate is using, but they also built in a little bit of a cushion more so than we did. So you're really probably talking on the high end of annual costs. The graph also shows total spending over time, including the $120 million that is going to be available prior to the bonds and then all the way through. So you're talking about $820 to $950 million through 2056 is this ongoing spending. Now, the second key observation has to do with the transfer of ownership. This was part of the legislation as well. Page 8 has some bullets that show some of the highlights. First, I would start with the Pimlico now is owned by MTROA. It was paid for $1. Second change is while Pimlico is being renovated, the state's going to need a place to do horse racing, and that's going to be Laurel Park. The wording here is a little clumsy in that bullet, so I want to be clear. It's a total of a 3-year lease. The first 2-year leases are for $1. The third year is an option in case the construction isn't ready by early 2027. The state or MTROA can, for $3.5 million, lease Laurel Park for 1 more year. Also, as part of this is a licensing agreement to pay for the the intellectual property, that is Preakness and the Black Eyed Susan stakes. And so on those days, the prior owners will get 2% of the handle. And also there's a $3 million annual payment that is going to escalate 2.5% a year. Those don't start until 2027 when the Pimlico has the Preakness again after the construction. There also have been some operational changes. There's like I said, MTROA through the Maryland Jockey Club will be administering the races. Now, there are about 127 racing days are anticipated in 2025. That's a little bit less than in the prior year, but I'm told that the amounts, the purses are going to be a little bit more per day than they were in 2024. The final page on the back of this analysis shows the racing schedule and shows which days there will be racing. And yeah, and ownership transferred, I think it was January 1st of 2025, and also there's now I think there's still an operating agreement that needs to be put together and it's finalized, but they're working towards having the racing and having themselves set up, and they should be authority should be prepared to answer questions and discuss the details of how that looks and what the final agreement might look like. The last point I was going to make has to do with the facilities. It's very important. There's obviously a $3.5 million extra charge if the facilities aren't ready by the end of 2026. There's a training site has been identified. It's about 23 miles from Pimlico. And it's about, I believe, about a $4 million acquisition cost. The plans obviously need to be renovated or built, actually, mostly in this case. And so the authority should be prepared to discuss what those plans are. And same with Pimlico. As far as we know, the demolition is going to begin a few days after the 2025 Preakness, but we don't have a lot of details about what the site plans are and exactly what their timeline is, when the design is going to be ready, when construction starts, and that's kind of details. So finally, I'll go to page 10. That's the recommended action page. It shows the recommendation, which is some narrative to provide details about what's going on with the construction of the training facility and Laurel Park. We request a report twice, once at the end of August. We hope there should be a lot more information available then. And that's also in time for spending affordability and the kind of when in the part of the cycle for the legislature, we provide a lot of information. And also a second report then at the end of December so that we have good information in time for next year's legislative session. There's standard appendices, a racing schedule, and with that, I'll conclude my remarks and take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. Any questions for our analysts? Anyone? All right, thank you. Come on up. Before you begin, or when you begin, please state your name for the record and you can proceed.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair Jackson, members of the subcommittee. My name is Mark Brody. I'm the Executive Director of the Thoroughbred Racetrack Operating Authority.
And I'm Greg Cross, the Chairman. Good to see you all again.
I have a brief statement. Just jump in. As I just indicated, Mark Brody, and then we have Chairman Greg Cross joining me here today. We also have Bill Knopf behind us, who's the president of the Maryland Jockey Club, TMJC. We have discussed our DLS analysis with Patrick and have no further questions or anything to add at this time. The authority has just finished a very productive year, completing all of our action items in our 2024 report, including the creation, staffing, and operational setup of the Maryland Jockey Club, Inc., which assumed day-to-day operational control of Maryland Thoroughbred Racing on January 1st, 2025. We appreciate the opportunity to serve in this capacity and strongly believe that the progress we have made in 2024 has laid the necessary groundwork to maintain and grow an industry that contributes over $2 billion yearly to the economy of Maryland. I want to personally thank the 41st delegation and the community stakeholders for their unwavering support, partnership, and wisdom as we navigate this undertaking. Thank you very much, and at that time, we'll take any questions. Thank you.
I just have one correction to our analyst report. Our lease at Laurel for $1 runs through the end of 27. The extension option is through 28 for $3.5 million, which makes it a little better for us. But it is clumsily worded. I think that's my fault, so I apologize. We have a $1 lease that runs, $1 runs through the end of 27, and then it's $3.5 million to extend into 28. We're here, no, I let him, we submitted a written report that contains all the information and analyzes everything that we've done relative to last year. We had 8 action items, all of them have been completed. So I'm here just to answer questions with respect to construction, where we are in process. Anything you want?
I have 5 for you. That may have been answered, or you may have, hopefully you have the answers.
I hope so,
And
too.
hopefully it's already in the report. So if it is, excuse me for that, but these were prepared prior to coming in. So one, I heard you mention that the nonprofit was established, and it took, it started on January 1, correct?
Right. Correct.
All right. That's the first one. Talk to us about your 6 permanent pen positions that you have budgeted.
Yeah, so we have 3 currently vacant. One of them is an Office of Attorney General position, so I believe it's a paralegal. So we have an Assistant Attorney General that's been assigned to us full-time
You
since.
said that's vacant?
Yes, correct, the paralegal. We have an Assistant Attorney General that is filled, but they had 2 pens.
Oh, gotcha.
For the Office of Attorney General. So we have one that's vacant, it's a paralegal that is, up to the discretion of the Attorney General's office to utilize, as I understand. And then we have 2 other positions that are vacant within MTROA that are more like admin positions that we're trying to figure out what we need to do. I mean, our function has changed significantly since we were, in the process of leading up to getting everything approved and moving forward, and then now we're in the construction phase working with MSA, and so we need to evaluate what we actually need positions for before just filling them, sort of just to fill them. But we do have a deputy executive director who's behind me, so we have.
Hiding back there.
Yep.
Yes.
Can you identify yourself?
Yep.
Sorry, my name's Sweta Gandhi.
All right, why are you hiding back there? Every time you move, she was moving. That's why I asked the question.
Our pins draw down on our project costs, so
Gotcha.
we try and keep it as lean and mean
No,
as we
look,
can.
I understand.
that's the
I'm just
goal.
asking because there were 6 pens assigned and we didn't have any idea of what was going on with that. And just please just keep us abreast as you're moving, as you continue to move forward. Secondly, speak to us about the consultants you have on board.
So we principally have 2 consultants to MTROA. Gold Rabbit Sports, which is a marketing consultant, which they advise FIFA, they advise the Olympics, they've set up racetracks, so they're advising us with respect to programming elements for Pimlico. We also have engaged Canopy, who were the consultants for Camden Yards, to act as owner's rep in connection with the construction project and give us best-in-class sports facility programming, both are unique. Most of the other consultants that appear were transitioned. So, for example, the entity didn't take effect until January 1, but we hired Mr. Knopf in September. He could not go on the payroll of First Racing, so he appears as a consultant to us for 4 months until he transitions as an employee. He's now off the books for us, and he goes on the TMJC payroll. So many of the items that you show up as consultants are actually just fronting expenses that now are picked up by TMJC now that we're in the operating control.
Got you. As well as, so MSA's role and the things that they're doing. Is there any conflict between what the consultants were doing? Understanding that you have to get started and you have to get to a certain point.
Our consultants are, it's construction, right? So, but they ask us for, what are your programming needs? And we stepped into a business that was in so many ways broken. So we're trying to get best-in-class advice so that we can give answers to the MSA, and then we try and work together to accomplish what we think is going to be the best mission.
Okay. All right, that's 2 of what I have for you. But
Keep going.
But anybody else ready yet? So operating costs seem a bit high, so they should level out here shortly.
Oh, we have the operating cost, the $10 million was set as working capital for TMJC because it was starting from day 1 with $0, so it didn't have any money to start paying people. But our costs are well below our $3 million budget.
And so the escalation for the 25 budget was just sort of getting it ramped up?
It was just that $10 million working capital hit.
Okay.
Startup. Exactly.
Yeah, all right, cool. Tell us about the procurement process. I know you've worked great. We've had the hearings in our full committee and the work that went into the District 41st team and the other entities within that community. So tell us a little bit about your procurement, particularly dealing with the MBE contractors.
Yeah, well, we are, what I know the term is waived or we're excluded from certain procurement policies, given the nature of the work and the timeline that we were working with. But we have been keeping track of our MWE participation. We have at least one woman-owned consultant group, but a lot of it has been very niche work, very specific to the industry, very few people that can actually do it around the country and world. And so we've had to hire in a quick time frame to get responses to MSA and otherwise, the best around the world that can do the job.
We only have two, so
Yeah.
one's women-owned. So
Right.
Canopy's women-owned and Gold Rabbit Sports is not.
Right.
But they're, and they were, as Mr. Brody said, they're both complete niche. So it's very difficult to find somebody who has marketing experience in the horse racing industry and with big events. And it also is very unique to find somebody like Canopy Sports that specializes just in sporting venues and their construction. So it's not, it was sort of a one-stop shop for each of them.
Right, appreciate that. And so as you have been proceeding, getting yourself set up over the years, are there meeting agendas or minutes to your meetings?
Yes.
Have you been adhering to the Open Meetings Act? I know you're a
Yes.
little different, you had a little different
No,
setup.
we have. We've been adhering to the, I've been in whole education for me, but we are adhering to the open meetings. We post our agenda, we have a website, we post our agenda, we post the minutes, and we've been very careful to adhere.
We do appreciate that because this is a huge investment, once again, in the horse racing industry in our state. And we're hoping that this is it, gentlemen,
I hope so, too.
And so, yeah, we would definitely, these questions I'm going to ask you are going to be emailed to you as well. So if you got some follow-up, because
Sure.
we have a full committee that we need to report out to. So appreciate that. Lastly, I believe is the analyst states that the funds available for Pimlico and the training facility are, it's over $500 million.
That's correct.
It's a little higher cost than originally planned.
No, it's pretty much right, but it just wasn't highlighted that cash was there. It was always in the 500 to 517 range. I think it's 527 is what you, right? So it's pretty much the same. And I'm sure we'll need every dollar of it.
Okay, all right. So if, when you get these, could you kind of articulate more your belief that you're going to need more, or kind of qualify that for us?
I think it's been clearly conveyed that there aren't any more funds, so we're gonna have to fit in our budget one way or the other. So.
I hear you. But I have a report to do as well, so I need your help on that.
I understand that very clearly.
All right. Okay, all right. Thank you, gentlemen. Right now, Senator Roosevelt.
Thank you. So what are your biggest problems?
Right now?
Yeah.
Schedule. We're just the time, very intense schedule to get it completed, very intense and compressed schedule. Just setting up the entity was no small task. I mean, there were 200 contracts that had to be reviewed, vetted, and signed. We have how many labor contracts? 3? Two labor agreements that had to be negotiated and transferred. We had to get the licenses and the racing dates approved. Mr. Knopf can speak to it more, but we did reduce in racing dates, but we did that by partnering with Virginia. So Virginia's filling in the 2 months that we're not racing so that our horsemen can go down there. So all of that was, but we've done all that in 6 months, effectively. And with respect to the construction, things didn't get approved until June. We started meeting in July for some workshops to go through what the programming needs were, and we were starting from sketchy from what we got from first racing. So we've had to move very quickly to do that. The Stadium Authority is working double time. I think they've said this is the most aggressive schedule they've ever had to deal with, and we all feel that pressure. So that's our biggest challenge.
So how are you dealing with it? I mean, I get it. I mean, I get the basic issue, but I mean, so you're saying everybody's just working very hard, or?
Well, that is it. Everybody's working very hard, and so that's why we have the consultants. We try and pre-plan. We literally will tee up to work through the weekend. I'm putting 6 hours a day on it.
Only 6 hours a day, okay.
To try and get through the process. It's very demanding, and that's just where we are right now. And it looks like we've got to build 2 facilities, and we have to get it all done in 3 years. And as well as get this business going, we got to populate the board immediately. We have to get this operating agreement done, so that's on the shelf.
So those are not done yet.
The operating agreement's drafted, it hasn't been approved by the board. There's been some back and forth, there continues to be back and forth. And we have identified board candidates for our board's consideration. That needs to be done. Those things have to be done immediately. So we have a board meeting tomorrow. I think a lot of that will be taken up.
So you think a lot of that will be done this week?
Yes.
The formal stuff, gotcha.
Some of it's still, there's still healthy debate, but yes.
So before you go to the next one, you said a couple things. One, so you have, your meetings are published, your meeting dates are published. And two, you said Mr. Knopf, could speak more to the partnering with Virginia on those other races.
Yeah.
So our races are, the numbers are less, but Virginia is gonna help us out. And speak to the purses, right? So I think the analyst spoke that the purses were going to increase. So who makes that call? Is it the board? And right now, we don't have a board, so.
No, it's
Explain that to us.
The horsemen do that.
The horsemen do that,
The
okay.
horsemen do that, but it was, you go ahead and talk about how we got
Sure.
this.
The horsemen receive their purse account. All the monies go into their purse account. They work with the Maryland Jockey Club, us, to determine the number of race days and the appropriate amount, and then the per allocation per race day. So from last year to this year, we reduced 31 racing days. And primarily, it's July, August, and a little bit at the beginning of the year in January. So we're trying to consolidate the number of race days to increase the purse value, so that will draw more horses. That is the objective, is to get more wagering, more horses per race. But as was mentioned, we don't want to leave our horsemen out in the lurch in July and August, so that now they can go race in Virginia, and we will do a partnership with the Virginia track, Colonial Downs, to offer our horsemen something to race during that time, because they will be stabled still at Maryland at Laurel Park.
Okay, all right, thank you. I think I got that.
Yeah, and our consultant, both Mr. Knopf and we have another consultant we hired before we got Mr. Knopf, Corey Johnson, and he helped facilitate those conversations with Virginia. But ultimately, to your question, that was a Maryland Horsemen's Association call. And they're working with the breeders to set up whatever incentives may attach to that.
Okay. My question was anticipating calls from them.
Yeah, and I know it's
After
there.
they saw this report, so I do appreciate the clarification. Senator Rosebud, you still?
Yeah, thank you. So looking for, let's say just the rest of this year, what are the major risks to not achieving what you're trying to achieve?
We have normal risks of construction. So I'll start with the training center. We've identified the location. We have to finalize the contract. There are 42 tenant and common owners on the other side. They're selling, but we have to get all the signatures, just mechanics. Then that has to be approved by the legislative committee and then ultimately BPW. But we've got an access agreement, so the stadium authority is going in and mapping the site. We already have a preliminary mapping. We have 327 acres, which is going to be gracious. We will have 120 acres approximately for the sited part of the training site, but that gives us expansion. We could actually have pads that somebody might condo in the future, so that's all to be worked out. With respect to Pimlico, we're in the middle schematic design. We're doing value engineering and programming off of that. Tomorrow we will be laying out for the board. The horsemen have approved basically the horse operational site plan for the site. And then next will be clubhouse and the rest of the site. That'll have to be, we're hoping that we'll have schematic plans finalized, I would say April or April, May, but we have to talk to the community and we've got to allow time for that. There's a whole step through, we've got to make time for everyone. My first time through this. And then we're going to do construction 30 days after Pimlico's torn down. The Maryland Archives is going to be taking all the art facilities out of the project and storing them for us and creating a list. We're trying to figure out how we fold all that into the new project, so we're honoring the history. And we're expecting that we will start construction hopefully in the fall, but that is, and I forgot the word, the transportation person knew exactly what it was, but we're doing the same thing. We'll start construction while designs are being finalized, so we'll be dual tracking in order to hit the schedule. But we're counting on the Stadium Authority for that expertise. We're giving programming, we're signing off on design, we're the interface, but luckily we have them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the members? Thank you all very much. I look forward
Read
to.
our report. Don't forget, it's the 150th anniversary of Preakness coming up.
We'll get a little advertisement in there.
Coming out for Preakness.
All right, folks. All right, that concludes the
Yeah, great. Have a good day, everybody.
Yep. So tomorrow, obviously, the